皆様お待たせをいたしました。改めまして本日ご多忙の中、ブロックチェーンの健全な発展と新しいビジネス創造のためにご来場、そしてご視聴賜りました誠にありがとうございます。
as well as new business opportunities out of your busy schedules. We now would like to start the next session on tasks and challenges in social implementation of Japanese digital ID. This is going to be a talk session. Let me introduce the two speakers. CEO of TrustDoc, Mr. Takahiro Chiba. Member of the board, TrustDoc, Mr. Akihide Higo. So, let us get started. Mr. Chiba, Mr. Higo, turning it over to you. Thank you. So, in this session, Japanese version digital identity, tasks and challenges in social implementation of Japanese digital ID is the title of this session. It's going to be a session of 40 minutes. Let me introduce myself. Sorry. I am CEO of TrustDoc. My name is Chiba. Digital ID applications, personal authentication API are the services that we offer. I'd like to talk about the company's history first. Our history. Rather than being a pure startup, R&D, we are a company that was born out of R&D of companies. Gayax Inc. is a predecessor. Mr. Higo was leading the development division. So we were born out of that R&D. It's some time ago. Do you remember? Yes. Initially, how did it come about? Gayax, sharing economy, that is the area of business, supporting business creation and supporting companies. As we worked on that area, in terms of technology, what should we do to support those activities? Sharing economy from B2C to C2C. Let's say that there is a distributed trend. Blockchain distributed system may be compatible. So we started to look at that in doing our research. That was started in 2016. And the theme was digital identity. This is our main theme of today. How much do you know about this? I don't know. Actually, the first name we had was Digital Identity KK was the name of the company as we started. You might think that our company started with the name TrustDoc, but we started a company called Digital Identity, and the current name of the company is TrustDoc. So from the get-go, at the time of inception, we were working on digital identity. That's about 4 years ago in 2016. Sharing ID, what was it like? We started research and development on blockchain, but there are many areas of usage. Finance was something that we had been looking at, but other than finance, there are many other areas. There is a number of use cases listed up there. ID, we thought that there is potential in this area. So the first thing we did was sharing economy businesses, ID that could be shared among them. We tried to create that by making use of blockchain. Sharing economy providers, we called upon them to work on R&D together. So that's how we got started. Initially, this is a blockchain event today, but making use of blockchain, digital identity could be created, putting together a mock to verify that. And in the following year, MIC demonstration project, Yuzawa City of Akita Prefecture, together with the prefecture, JPKI, Digital ID Certificate Demonstration Project was organized. What was it like? Yuzawa City in Akita Prefecture. There was a dormant space that was made available to citizens, and a recreation space. When citizens were to use that space, they needed to go to the city office, pay a few hundred yen on the day, and the meeting rooms were to be used with the city employees. We thought we could do something about this. So that is what this demonstration project was about. In ID area, making use of blockchain and JPKI, we have been working on this, and there are three things that we have noticed. Now, identity verification documents, driver's license and passport, how did they come about? What are they like? They all have respective histories. We thought that we need to understand that first. And there are many laws and regulations. That also needs to be understood well. We were an engineering team, techie engineering team. So everything could be solved through technology, we thought, but there were many systems in place. Not just knowing the systems, but what was the background against which these regulations were created? We thought that we need to understand that. And in each industry sector, there are business practices and customs. The system is in place, but there are applications and implementations in a slightly different way. And we were wondering why. People are doing it for a reason. There is some reason in the background in adding a process or additional things. So personal identification, things that are being done in industry sectors, there is a meaning and reason behind that. So we thought we needed to understand that. Not looking for a silver bullet, we needed to understand the ground. We needed to understand the practice and laws and regulations. Regardless of blockchain and other technology, RDB or JPKI, before working on that, we needed to understand what is taking place on the ground in a three-dimensional way. That is how we got started. And based on that, the services that we are providing, KYC as a service, what we are doing is digital personal identification service is what we are providing. 24/7. We do identity verification, not just checking the ID document. KYC-related processes are all provided in the form of API solutions, risk confirmation, mailing, my number, acquisition, back-end as a service, not just tools, but as a service provider, we are providing these services. Interface, API doesn't have form, but where there are physical forms, web and native apps, those are things that we provide. Now, Trust Doc Uploader, we have a dedicated JavaScript for identity verification. On various websites and apps, this can be added on for processing. In eKYC, we do have dedicated application for identity document. If one has a My Number card, personal number card, or digital signature function is incorporated, and the so-called eKYC methods are all included in this app. I see chips of driver license could be read. Without a driver license, API could be used as a linkage to various banks if one doesn't have a driver's license, and multi-language is enabled. We are fully dedicated on digital identity. I'm so sure that all of you are all dedicated in your work. But without looking at what is taking place on the ground, we thought that we would never be able to do this. We have made a determination. Engineers would understand this. Engineers are doing engineering without much perspiration, but 24/7, every day without taking a break. We are processing KYC. Every day we are doing R&D on digital identity. And because of digital identity, it's not just a fluke that we have started. This is something that we have been working on all along. There are many words here. It's as if it's a word cloud. But digital identity area, there are many words being used.
About an hour ago, under the theme of self-sovereign identity, Yamato-san and other people, we've been talking about this, and we had also topics to talk about self-identity and so forth. And that could be realized through blockchains in the form of decentralized identity. And then there's a personal data store and information bank that would be serving as an agent. And there's BANT in China and credit scores. And what we will be talking about today is, regardless of the technical backing, but rather we want to talk about regulatory digital identity and how we are embarking on this challenge. One thing which we've been working on, which we think is quite critical and key, and these are some keywords: nexus, interoperability, cooperation, and network distribution network. These are words that sound like network. And when we hear the word digital identity, it sounds like it's a point, but actually we're looking at this field as a line. Digital identity, me being myself. And that could be separated into two parties. One is a person who gives one's name, identifies oneself, and there's a counterpart to this person. And let's say that this is the person who will check. And so the person who would identify himself and the person who would check the digital identity. And when we talk about various identities, we tend to be looking at the person who identifies himself, gives its name. But there's also individuals, there's government, and the person who investigates and checks. When we do identity verification, there's customer due diligence. Know your customer is one aspect of it. But CDD or KYC is about the person who checks, who investigates. And we can use the analogy of the coin. It's both sides of the coin. If digital identity has the surface, is the front of the coin, there's always a back of it, who is the checker. You're visualizing for the very first time. We often talk about this in our discussions, but it's been very difficult to express this. And finally, today, Chiba-san was able to visualize this. Today, we are looking at the customer due diligence side of work. And when we hear digital identity, we vaguely imagine this structure. Just looking at the front side, one side of a coin is quite dangerous because the other side could be missing in the big picture of the discussion. We need to be addressing both sides. That's why in doing digital identity, we are addressing KYC. Sometimes we hear this: a perfect digital identity may no longer require customer due diligence or KYC if there is one perfect digital ID. Well, that sounds nice and convincing, but I don't think that is totally right. There are different industries and sectors in which we work on the KYC in the background, and my impression is that the customer due diligence and KYC in the private sector is about who will be regarded as your customer. It's all about the party that does the due diligence, that does the checking. No matter how people name themselves and identify themselves, you need to have the due diligence process and know your customer process in order to check who that person is. And therefore, customer due diligence and KYC has nothing to do directly with digital ID. Of course, there are various functions and contents that will facilitate CDD and KYC, but just because having a digital ID doesn't mean you no longer need CDD or KYC. Now, from the perspective of conducting due diligence or checking, there are various laws and regulations in place. One very well-known law is Act on Prevention of Transfer of Criminal Proceeds for financial institutions or real estate industry and second-hand dealers. And there's also Mobile Phone Improper Use Prevention Act. And these regulations tend to come after the fact when some fraudulent act is conducted, anti-money laundering or Act on Prevention and Transfer of Criminal Proceeds came in place in order to address such frauds, and the fraudulent land brokers led to laws related to real estate transactions. And these are there in order to prevent or to institute measures when some troubles occur. That's why KYC and CDD are necessary. And therefore, the purpose is to establish a procedure or a transaction to ensure safety and security. When something happens, we want to have a mechanism to ensure that it will be investigated and checked. And so the digital ID comes only second to the checking mechanism. When we look at the various logic, we felt that it would be better to introduce a mechanism that could be overlaid on the existing process. And so our next step was to think of what could be layered on top of the existing process. Now, how are we going to take on this initiative? In the field of digital identity, what we implemented in the society, first of all, which is already public, is this. What we are providing is the eKYC personal ID app, iPhone App Store or Android, Google Play. That's where you should go to download this app. JPKI or eKYC could be addressed using this app. There are various certification IDs and various IDs from the person who's identifying himself. Information is available. For example, 7 different types of photographs are available, and companies like Docomo or MUFG, based on contract, personal verification is conducted. Even if you cannot show a driver's license, all available information to verify one's identity is introduced. And as a function, there are various types of identity verification, all incorporated, from JPKI to normal identity verification is covered in compliance with laws and regulations, and we are making additional updates. Just implementing function is not enough. We need to have a better understanding of the due diligence side. What kind of timing, what kind of protocol will be required, what kind of mechanism is necessary for recording, for example. This is the part that we are going through a very difficult time. Yes, a lot of challenges. So the digital innovation application has been put together in order to support the person who identifies themselves. So in other words, providing different types of ways to identify themselves. But we also need to think of the checker side. The checker side, that functionality will need to be provided. Otherwise, the person identifying themselves do not find it easy to use the app. And so we have a great coverage for to provide functionalities for companies that conducts due diligence of the individuals.
それこそ一番最初の僕らもデメモブロックチェーンでシェアリング ID みたいなものを一番山の頂点から始めようと思って
Sharing economy, we wanted to start from the top of the mountain, but looking around, that wasn't how it was going to be. So it's not just early adopters. Late majority must feel comfortable. So we wanted to visualize the limit. That's what we have been doing over the past years. Half a step ahead, we want to move to make it visible to everyone. And platform regulations are coming up. Not just ring fencing data within the company, because this is social infrastructure. It's not winner takes all to monopolize everything. You need to look at the public interest. You need to create a network of flows. We need to build such a network, not just alone. So regardless of the growth of one's company, we want to create this network. So what are the things that we are committed to? On the technology side, various standardization we are working on. OpenID Foundation or FIDO Alliance. In OpenID Foundation, what was being done? OpenID Connect is a specification. ID providers and the users, relying parties between them, how information could be shared. In addition, personal identification of authentication, where and when was it done? Was it conducted? Such subset is also being shared. So specification as well as implementation, we are committed. And FIDO Alliance, this is certification body, and KYC is the issue here. ID recovery is one thing that is being done, but on the FIDO side, as for application for somebody who identifies oneself, the information that you want to pass on to the other party, who I am and who was it verified. But the fact that it was authorized and authenticated, it should be done close to the device. And the operator and the server side must receive that information. So FIDO is what does that. So we are looking at this and we're involved in these activities. KYC working group. We are joining the working group for standardization purpose. Our interactions with the government, with the industry groups, METI, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, we're working with them. Any examples that you can give us? We are increasing our activities with the government agencies. From the get-go, we have been working and talking with the government agencies. METI, initially, when we were working on sharing ID, we have been sharing our ideas with them. Most recently, at METI, GVIS ID is what we are doing. Corporate ID and our digital identity and KYC solutions. We were talking about the combination of these to come up with a solution. FSA is the supervisory body of financial institutions that we are providing our services to. MIC, My Number Card, is being administered. JPKI, when we worked with Akita Prefecture, JPKI signature verifier is what we do. So with platform operators and app creators, there's about 30 companies in all, but most recently, the number has increased. So JPKI being used largely. My Number Card, this is linked to increasing the use cases to make it more convenient. So we have been invited to join their experts meeting. NPA, they are supervising act on prevention of transfer of criminal proceeds. So we're working with them too. FSA's online identity verification, the methods are not so much available now. Mail address verification, what was being done is whether the incoming box can be made or not. So what about social ID, whether other ID, well, biometric ID, who it is, and what is the age, you cannot check that, but online background check, you can only check this with personal ID cards. When transactions go online, this is becoming an issue. So on the industry groups, Blockchain Association and FinTech Association, Mr. Higo is a member of the board. And as for Sharing Economy Association Japan, GAIAX was a member of the board in launching this. So CTC, the transactions are increasing. So it is in these domains where we are working with these people. So the form that we are showing, various personal ID documents making possible identity verification, we are doing that. So half a step ahead, what we are working on is digital ID, digital identity in the form of digital ID certificate. This is the first round. Last month in Fukuoka City, beyond COVID-19, a demonstration partner we became. So using digital ID, we are planning a demonstration project. Citizens of the city, after identity verification, digital ID would be issued. And that could be used in online window or real windows. So with smartphones, background checks are being done. So we are trying to list up some of the issues together with Fukuoka City. Now, digital personal ID, there are very complicated issues. Where should personal information reside? It has to be captured right. What would happen if that information is lost? There are many issues and concerns. We are working with these issues. Mr. Higo, any comments from your side? Now, digital personal ID, digital identity, what kind of identity should it be? Method of identity verifications, a number of them exist. And from the user's standpoint, your personal ID that one has, that should be linked to digital ID so that it could be incorporated into a smartphone. So what exactly is digital identity? Identifiable thing. We are using secret keys. Secret keys would be owned, and various attributes or personal ID certificates should be checked. So that is how we call it digital ID. But there are problems that we have. Personal information, where should it reside? That is an issue that we are looking at. There are things that we can talk about and not talk about. Yes, we are struggling with these issues. When we offer these services, it's not just meeting the requirements of the person who tries to identify or the verifier, their KYC requirements. We need to look at both perspectives to visualize the world half a step ahead for social implementation. That is what we wish to do. This is what we show oftentimes. In this area, we're not just doing this domestically in Japan. Already, we are going to Southeast Asia, and self-sovereign identity was discussed in the earlier session. There's more than 1 billion people without an ID, and unbanked people one of the problems there is not having an idea. Because you don't have an ID, you cannot open a bank account and you cannot do transactions. Providing financial services to these people is one thing, but if you deliver personal IDs, they will be able to own bank accounts and will be able to use various services. So one of the source issues of unbanked issue, this could solve that problem. The UN SDGs 16-9 issuing IDs to people, ID 2020. That is because it's not just a Japanese problem. It's not just the overseas problem. This would be most powerful when you go cross borders.
Across the world, fulfilling various regulations and laws, this could be an app for that. In Japan, we could support the spread of My Number Card, and those who don't have a My Number Card could use a driver licenses, and don't have driver licenses, you could reside on bank accounts and so forth. So we are under the influence of COVID-19, and it's difficult to travel. But even today, at this moment, the workers who come to Japan to work, there's no ID check being done for them. And when they remit back to their home country, the ID checking is done in the background. And so there are a certain number of people who go through the ID check process on a daily basis. Non-face-to-face transactions are increasing with COVID-19, and I think there's more that we can do in this regard. So in summary, social implementation of the Japanese version of digital ID. This is what we want to implement. Not doing digital ID first of all, but we want to be able to target all different types of person identity check. And the next step will be, as we are working together with Fukuoka City, we want to digitalize it and retain it. The technical underlying technology could be anything. We are not persistent on how we achieve it, but we want to retain the digitalization. And then the next step will be structurize and implement full digital. That's the kind of vision we have. So this will be done in a phased manner. It's like climbing a mountain. This is what you refer to as the Japanese version. Japanese digital ID, how digital ID could spread in Japan. Yes, that's right. It's very cumbersome, I would say, but this cumbersome part is what requires some work by someone to do, and we are willing to do it. I think engineers weren't determined enough to do the hard work, but we are determined in building the digital layer for ID. We tend to have this line perspective instead of dots or points. Both of these sides will need to be protected and climb a mountain half a step at a time. The person who identifies himself would need to have their personal information and privacy protected. How could that be protected by design? And the verifier side wants to go through the customer due diligence and know your customer in order to ensure the security and safety of their transaction and process. Both of these sides needs to be addressed, and I think everyone is more or less in agreement of this. And although it will be half step at a time, we want to establish a Japanese version of a digital identity. So Trust Dog, as in the background, back office for the verifier side, we are working together with you. Non-face-to-face transaction is growing more and more with COVID-19. CDD or KYC, ensuring identity verification. If you are having difficulties, please contact us regardless of which law you operate under, which sector you are in. I'm sure we can provide you with some advice. And if we cannot provide support, we know who to contact. And we are committed to do what we can in underpinning the digital government initiative from the private sector side. How much time do we have? About 5 more minutes to go? Well, from the perspective of KYC, we started our effort, and in the meantime, we embarked on that initiative willing to establish digital identity. And so we're working on both sides. And the digital identity side is becoming gradually visible to the users. But the fact that we cover both sides, address both sides, KYC side and digital identity side, would enable us to accelerate the benefits we could bring to the users when it becomes possible. We hope to deliver a service that is helpful and useful. That's all from me. I think we still have some more time, but lately we are working on a couple of things. Maybe we can talk about that. So what are the types of businesses introduce our product? On the right-hand side of the slide, you can see these are government administrative procedure, share economy, and fintech, and so forth. There are some that are covered. And under COVID-19, lending to corporates, financial institutions use this function. Delivery service is also very popular these days, home delivery service. And hiring part-time workers for delivery, this kind of transaction is growing as well. So under COVID-19 and also after COVID-19, this kind of features, I think, will only become unnecessary. We also use Slack, whether the person you're contacting is the person you think. Online medicine is also becoming popular, but medical documents and information on medical checkup, information should only be disclosed to that person, and the personal ID must be ensured. Needs in that area is only going to increase. Before talking what would become possible with legislative amendment, we want to introduce features and functions that are already possible under current laws and regulations. Any kind of administrative procedure will be addressable using our app. What you see on the right-hand side is usually companies that use KYC, or it could be governments, municipal governments. We are putting a lot of emphasis on providing a wider variety. For example, we operate behind illegal gambling, behind the big or online gambling. Our functions, our service is in operation. I think many of you are watching us online today, but if you could go to Google Play and download this, you will be able to have a better understanding. Unless it is tied to a use case, you won't be able to use it even by downloading, but going on a workation and renting a room is also possible using our function. And if you go to Yahoo Toto and buy big lottery, this identity verification is utilized. And so although half step at a time, our functions are becoming available in the society and implemented in the society. I hope that's helpful. Thank you very much. That was very inspiring. That was Mr. Chiba and Mr. Higo from TrustDog. Thank you very much. With this, we would like to conclude this session titled Tasks and Challenges and Social Implementation of Japanese Digital ID. Housekeeping announcement for the next session from 4:15. Hall A will have a session on blockchain, future technological crossroads, blockchain interoperability. And here in Hall B, there will be a relay presentation under the title of Trade Finance and Blockchain Technology. Those of you who are joining us online, please select the URL of the session of your choice. Please wait a few more minutes before we begin the next session. Thank you.